Fed Chair Jay Powell faced 2 days of grilling on Capitol Hill. Yesterday, Senator Elizabeth Warren asked why the Fed's inflation forecast is now higher than it was just 6 months ago. Senator Warren joins us this morning. She's the lead Democrat on the Banking Committee. And Senator, thank you for being with us this morning.
Happy to be with you.
Why don't we get at your line of questioning from yesterday? You were really getting at this idea of where inflation targets for the Fed are headed. What's your thought behind that? What did you think of the answer you got?
So I just want to make sure everyone knows what the numbers were that the Fed put out. The Fed changed its prediction from inflation this year at 2.5% to 3.1%. It changed its prediction on unemployment, not a lot, but from 4.3% to 4.5%. And most significantly, changed its prediction on GDP growth from 2.1 to 1.4. Pretty significant downgrade. So I asked Chairman Powell, what happened? And the answer from Chairman Powell was the Trump tariffs. And I read that as it's the Trump tariffs, it's the Trump chaos. And that's the problem we've got right now. I want to see those interest rates come down, but it's Donald Trump who's standing in the way of getting them down by creating more economic chaos. And how do we know that? Because Chairman Powell said that they would have lowered interest rates back in February, but for the chaos caused by Donald Trump's tariff announcements.
You know, Senator Warren, I understand your concerns around this, and certainly there are a lot of economists who look at this and worry about what happens, the impacts that we have yet to see from the tariffs. They haven't materialized yet. But I don't think you always think that Jay Powell is the expert on these things. I mean, I think back to 2022 when you were very concerned about what Powell was doing at that point, the Federal Reserve raising rates, thinking that, hey, it's an ineffective cure, I think were your words, in terms of higher rates being able to end inflation.
Yep. And that's where I've been all along. I want to see the interest rates come down. And think about why. Because those interest rates come down. If they don't, that means families are paying more on their mortgages, they're paying more on their car loans, they're paying more on their credit cards. Those high interest rates are keeping costs up for families. For 3 years now, I've been pushing to try to get those interest rates down. And Powell now says, I would have lowered them, he said in February, but the Trump chaos has now changed the economic outlook. And the Fed's data do show that the economic outlook has shifted.
I guess my point is, though, you agree with Chairman Powell on these issues, or you think he should go ahead and cut rates anyway? Because that's what the president thinks.
Look, I still want to see the interest rates come down. I think they should lower. I want to see those interest rates come down. I do understand that conditions have changed and that Chair Powell says it is now harder to lower the interest rates than it would have been earlier. It is harder than it would be if Donald Trump were not out there creating this kind of economic chaos. And, you know, I just want to push back when you say there haven't been any effects from Donald Trump's announcements about the tariffs. Of course there have been.
No, I'm sorry, the inflationary. We haven't seen the inflationary effects that people have been predicting pretty widely. We just haven't seen them show up yet.
But what we are seeing is that all across the country, people are saying, whoa, I'm not going to start breaking ground on a new factory. I'm not going to buy a whole lot of expensive new equipment. I'm not going to bring in new workers to train up a workforce for new product lines. I'm not going to start a new business because I can't figure out in the most fundamental way whether or not materials that I have to import are going to be kind of at one price or going to have a big, big tariff put on them. And I can't figure out on things I want to export, whether or not there's going to be a reciprocal tariff on them. And as a result, what we get is an enormous amount of holding back. And I think that's why you see the shift in the GDP projections. That's a shrinking of the economy that we're experiencing now, because independently across this country, big companies and small companies are saying, man, I'm not taking a risk. I'm not making a big investment into that kind of an uncertainty. And who is causing all that? One person, Donald Trump.
We're going to get a GDP number, I think, today. And when you say shrinking, you don't mean the economy shrinking. You mean that the rate of increase.
The rate of growth. I'm sorry. You said it's the right way.
I know that you, Senator, and a lot of Democrats really don't like this bill, the big, beautiful bill. And in fact, there's schisms even in the Republican Party that you hear. A lot of it has to do with spending by the federal government. And here's where I want to ask you just a philosophical question. And it won't take me that long. I'm going to stop and then I'm going to let you answer. But back in prior to the pandemic, I guess we were spending 25% less than we're spending now. And in 2024, I think it was $7 trillion. So as a percentage of GDP, it's now 24% of GDP, federal spending, versus 20% in 2019. You would like to increase revenues through taxes on the wealthy, maybe not extending the Trump tax cuts. We had Bush tax cuts, too, that I used to say. Would you, if you did get a lot of growth in revenue that you would like to do with all these different ways, would you use that for just more government spending at 24% of GDP? Or would you say, you know what, let's at least freeze federal spending or even cut federal spending to get it back down to 20% of GDP? Would that ever be possible?
So let me start with where we should make cuts. You may remember back in January when Elon Musk was going to head up Doge, I sent him a letter and I said, here's $2 billion that you can do, $2 trillion that you can do in cuts right now. It's make the right cuts. And what were those cuts? How about we stop the fraud around Medicare Advantage? That would be about $850 billion that we could save. How about if we change how Defense Department does a lot of its spending and its acquisition? We can save hundreds of billions of dollars there. And I went through a list. The list had about 30 items on it and said, here are places that we could cut spending by $2 trillion. I'm totally in favor of that. But let me do the other half as well. There are places where we spend money that actually help grow this economy. Right now, the United States is 35th out of the 37 richest nations in the world, 35th on what we spend on childcare. And the consequence of our underspending and not making childcare available is that a lot of mamas and daddies either struggle to find that childcare and get to work or don't work at all. If we spent more money on childcare, we would increase productivity in this country. We'd have more mamas and daddies at work. We'd have our babies well taken care of. And we could pay a living wage to the childcare workers who do this critical work and who could really turn that into a sustainable business model. There's an investment that you can use to grow GDP. So for me, it's about budgets. Sure, they're about numbers, but they're about values. Do you really think that we ought to be continuing to spend money on defense acquisition that is just incredibly wasteful? Or do you think, as the Republicans do, we should stop spending money on health care for 16 million Americans? That's what the Republicans want to do. Do you think, as the Republicans do, we should do trillions of dollars in tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires? Or do you think that we should make those investments in our families here in the United States? And I think childcare is a perfect example of a place where we should be spending more. We got places we should spend less, but no matter what, the billionaires ought to be paying their fair share.
I have another good one for you, and we'll do it the same way. I'll finish, and then I'll let you completely answer. So you've heard about soul searching in the Democratic Party, a lot of hand-wringing with what we've seen since the election. In the Democratic circles as well, the term lost in the wilderness comes to mind. I don't know whether we had a primary election for the mayor in New York yesterday, Senator, 2 days ago. Candidate Mamdani is a self-proclaimed socialist, advocated for defunding the police, globalizing the intifada. We have Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leading the field for 2028. I'm just wondering whether, well, A, did you speak out for or against the mayoral candidate? Did you congratulate him? And do you think this is the best strategy for your party right now to lurch even further to the far left after what happened in the last election?
You know, I think you're wrong on the whole defund the police and all, but look, I know that this is something that conservatives want to keep raising over and over, but I want to make a different point here. I think you misunderstand what his campaign was all about. His campaign was saying, I want to invest in New York City. I want to invest in people being able to have good jobs here, to put their kids in school, and to build housing. And he built a grassroots campaign. He didn't have a billionaire who came in and funded him. He didn't say, I'm going to make this a great place for billionaires to live. He said, I'm going to try as hard as I can to make New York City a place that works better for your family. And you know what? New Yorkers heard him. They believed him. They were inspired by him. And I think that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be, as the Democratic Party, the party that makes it clear that we are here for working families. We want to reduce the cost of housing. We want child care. We want our kids to be able to get a good education. The Republicans right now, with this tax bill that they're trying to push through, are really showing the contrast. They think they should be able to pay for tax giveaways to billionaires by taking away health care from 16 million Americans. They don't want to make investments in child care. They don't want to make investments in housing. They want to take away clean energy credits, which will drive up the cost of utilities for families all across this country. There is nothing in this Republican proposal that's about centering families and trying to make this economy work for them instead of for a handful of billionaires. And I think that's a pretty good place for the Democratic Party to go.
Senator, just back to Mamdani, he has some pretty argumentative views that a lot of people have disagreed with. There is some old footage of him saying that if Benjamin Netanyahu were to arrive in New York City, he'd have him arrested. Do you agree with that?
Look, I can't speak for him. I can only speak for myself. Yeah, and what I'm saying is the key that we talk about and need to keep talking about is the economy for American families. And that, in my view, is exactly what this race was about.
What are your thoughts on Netanyahu? Because these are some of the feelings that...
Netanyahu has been here. Nobody arrested him. What happens, though, what is happening, though, is that families across this country are struggling. And the response of the Republicans right now in Congress, we will be voting today. The response of the Republicans is let's take health care away from 16 million Americans so they can do tax giveaways to billionaires.
They're telling us we got to get out.
American values.
Now I have to interrupt. Now I'm doing what I said I wasn't going to do, but Senator, we don't have a lot of time left. Do you think he's a socialist? He's a self-avowed socialist. Do you think socialism is the correct path to do what you just said you wanted to do for working Americans? Do you? I mean, that's what he is. Let's just talk about. And we're the center of the universe for capitalism in New York City. And Wall Street, whether you love it or hate it, I know it has a connotation in certain areas, but it's the financial engine for all the great things that happen in the U.S. in terms of the private sector and raising money for companies and the stock market. All these great things that provide all the jobs, that's where you get the tax money to spend on all these great things you want to spend it on. Do you think that's the right thing for New York City?
You don't have to push me. I believe in markets. I love markets. I think markets are fabulous when they're honest markets. As you know, because we've had these discussions before, for example, we need markets with rules. Markets without rules are just theft. And that's part of why we need strong antitrust enforcement. But what our new mayor, I hope will be mayor-elect in New York City, is talking about is how to make that economy work for families. Where is your outrage over a Republican Party that is saying we want to fund even more tax giveaways to billionaires? We want to make sure that Meta gets a check, if this bill passes, for $15 billion, not for anything they do in the future, but for investments they made 3 years ago. We want to give them a check for $15 billion while we take away health care from everyone else, while we drive up utility costs for everyone else. That's not how we build a strong economy. You believe in markets, then you should believe in participation by the employees so that they get some of the wealth that they help create. And part of that means that through government, we create opportunities, not just for the billionaires to be able to come in and help build these buildings, but also to the workers who help build them as well. That's
Senator
what
Warren,
this whole fight is about.
I want to thank you for joining us this morning, Senator. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to see you.